Hello, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine. Here I bring you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It is currently the eve of December 7th, 2023 in the United States, the morning of December 8th, 2023 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, Israel is now confirming that one of the people that it had thought had been kidnapped into the Gaza Strip was actually killed on October 7th. His body remained in Israel, however, due to the nature of the attack, he was not identified until now. This leaves the number of hostages the IDF is currently confirming in the Gaza Strip at 137. Relating to the possibility of a future truce between the sides and hostage exchange, Al Arabi Al Jadid reported today that in Egypt there's growing optimism about a new truce and hostage deal that may be brewing between the sides, and that the source is specifically noting the nature of Israel's attacks and the nature of the rhetoric in Israel that is similar to that which was prior to the previous truce. The sources stated that Israel is probing a deal that will involve female soldiers, older males, and wounded male soldiers. In Israel, there's a complete rejection that any deal is on the table right now. Relating to this, the White House stated that the two sides are nowhere near another truce at this point, and even further regarding the possibility of a longer-term ceasefire, the Deputy National Security Counsel in the United States, John Feiner, stated that the U.S. has not given Israel a deadline about the war, adding that if it ends now, the Islamist organization Hamas will continue to be a threat. Moving on to the ongoing fighting within the Gaza Strip, there were rockets and mortars sent from the Gaza Strip towards primarily the southern parts of Israel, though less than in previous days. Mortars targeted primarily the areas surrounding the Gaza Strip. Ein HaShlosha, Kerem Shalom, there were rockets sent towards the town of Sderot as well. Relating to the ongoing fighting within the Strip itself, the fighting was primarily today in the three areas that the IDF is operating: Jabalia refugee camp, Sajaiya, both areas in the north, and Khan Yunis in the south. In the Jabalia refugee camp, it was reported that the IDF raided the Bisan outpost of Hamas as one of the main outposts in the area, and in addition it was noted that dozens of Hamas operatives have surrendered to the IDF within Jabalia, and there were also pictures and images shown of these operatives who were being arrested and taken back to Israel. There were reports of substantial gun battles in the area and a lot of weapons that were confiscated, including long-range missiles. In the areas of Sajaiya, images of substantial gun battles are also emerging, with IDF uncovered at least 7 tunnel entrances and massive weapons caches, including RPGs, rockets, and other ammunitions, and there are reports of dozens of face-to-face confrontations between the IDF and different Hamas battalions. The reports are that there are at least 200 Hamas operatives that were killed in Sajaiya in the last 24 hours. Relating to the areas of Khan Yunis down south is continuous activity of the IDF in the central parts of the city, specifically Brigade Number 98, the special forces of the IDF that are operating within Khan Yunis itself. Reports are of hundreds of encounters between the IDF and Hamas operatives, and there's continuous speculation emerging regarding the leadership of Hamas that, according to reports, was taking refuge in Khan Yunis. All kinds of reports of the IDF are suggesting they may be trying to flee through the tunnels towards the town of Rafah. Unclear at this point. In other news, a prominent figure in Hamas's intelligence units, Abdulaziz Rantisi, is reported assassinated. The assassination happened several days ago. The IDF is only confirming it now. According to reports, Rantisi took part in coordinating the October 7th attack as it was happening, since he was in charge of all the intelligence lookout posts of Hamas throughout the entire Gaza Strip. Along with him, Ahmed Ayush, who was a prominent figure in the different lookout units of the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, was assassinated. Other news relating to the Gaza Strip: the U.S. has reactivated its drone activity in the Gaza Strip, and this joins the United Kingdom that also several days ago said it is going to start operating non-attack drones throughout the skies of the Gaza Strip in order to facilitate with gathering intelligence, as well as with trying to locate any of the hostages. Regarding casualties, 7 IDF soldiers were reported killed in the last 24 hours. These include the son of Gadi Eisenkot. Gadi Eisenkot is a former chief of staff of Israel, but more importantly, he's a member of the war cabinet. The smaller cabinet in Israel that is managing the war includes several figures. Gadi Eisenkot is one of them. His son was killed in the Gaza Strip today. There are also reports of at least 274 IDF soldiers that were injured since the invasion of the Gaza Strip began. The Palestinian Health Ministry from the Gaza Strip is reporting upwards of 17,177 Palestinians that have been killed since the war began, and upwards of 46,000 that have been injured, as well as thousands that are currently trapped under the rubble, many of them presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, there were images today of hundreds of Gazans that were lining up in the Deir el-Balach area, which is a city in the central part of the Gaza Strip that the IDF has not invaded, trying to get food and clothing from an UNRWA station. In a rare move, in interviews with Al Jazeera, they published news items of a woman who was openly criticizing Hamas, stating that the humanitarian aid that is flowing into the Gaza Strip is being stolen by the movement and shipped underground. The Saudi Al Arabi network, which is a rival of the Al Jazeera network, published a larger feature in which Gazans chastised Hamas for bringing devastation to the Gaza Strip and for stealing humanitarian aid. Amidst these pictures from Deir al-Balach and relating to these reports, Prime Minister Netanyahu's Arabic spokesperson, Ophir Gendelman, today stated, and I'm quoting, "Gazans have started criticizing Hamas for the crimes, humiliation, intimidation, repression, and hunger," adding that there is hope for Gazans since after Hamas is destroyed, Gaza will be rebuilt and enjoy prosperity and security. Other news relating to the humanitarian situation, reports are coming in regarding the reasons underscoring the fact that Israel has doubled the amount of fuel that is going to start entering the Gaza Strip in the coming days. According to reports, the Israeli cabinet meeting was told very directly that the U.S. is conditioning its continuous support for Israel's military moves on increasing the amount of fuel and humanitarian aid that flows in. Secretary of State Antony Blinken today stated that Israel's intentions are not translated effectively to results on the ground, adding that humanitarian pauses must be expanded beyond a single neighborhood, and explicitly stating, and I'm quoting, "While we recognize that there is unusual difficulty when it comes to protecting civilians, Israel has an obligation to do it." Likely relating to this U.S. pressure on Israel to increase humanitarian aid, Israel agreed today to reopen the Kerem Shalom crossing for security inspection of aid trucks. So since the war began, Israel's closed all of the crossings between Israel and the Gaza Strip, which is where the majority of aid trucks used to flow in. And today, if aid trucks want to come into the Gaza Strip, they first have to arrive at the Nitzana crossing between Israel and Egypt, have a security inspection, then go to the Rafah crossing. The Nitzana crossing is itself quite small. Israel has now agreed, according to reports, to open the Kerem Shalom crossing to allow them to inspect a much larger contingent of trucks in a security manner, and then escort the trucks to the Rafah crossing in order to enter the Gaza Strip from there. According to different reports, this is a first step, and the next step is going to be to compel Israel in order to open the Kerem Shalom crossing to actually allow trucks to enter the Gaza Strip through there and avoid the extra step of going through Egypt and through Rafah to get into Gaza. The IDF also published photos today of Hamas rocket barrages against Beersheba that were launched yesterday, showing that they were launched from an area adjacent to UN compounds in Rafah, and that other rockets were launched from the safe zones in the Mawasi area. The IDF put out a lot of statements stating that the UN is not doing anything to stop Hamas from using these humanitarian areas as launching grounds for military activity, and suggesting that this is the reason that in the end UN facilities end up being caught in the crossfire as well. Regarding the amount of trucks and aid that entered, a lower amount of trucks entered since the last few days. A total of 69 trucks carrying food, water, and different medical supplies are reported to have entered the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, and a total of 61,000 liters of fuel, which again is less than has been in the last couple of days. Presumably that number is going to substantially increase as the decisions of Israel's cabinet to double the amount of fuel start to be implemented. Moving on to the West Bank, Israel's cabinet is due to convene on Sunday regarding the question of allowing Palestinian workers from the West Bank to re-enter Israel. Ever since October 7th, which is now exactly 2 months, all Palestinian workers, is over 100,000 who earn their living in Israel, have had their work permits suspended. This has caused massive unemployment in the Palestinian Authority, as well as growing poverty, and has also affected Israel's economy as well. There's different political pressure within Israel to, on the one hand, allow the entrance of Palestinian workers in order to allow businesses to start running again, while on the other hand, there's also pressure from Israel's hawkish right-wing elements to not allow Palestinian workers to come in from the West Bank. The cabinet is due to meet about this on Sunday. Other news related to the West Bank, a Palestinian was arrested today with a gun outside the Alon settlement. According to intelligence reports, they were tracking him and he was trying to infiltrate the settlement to carry out an attack. He was arrested and the attack averted. In the right-wing demonstration in East Jerusalem that I mentioned several days ago was going to occur on Thursday. Today, the right-wing demonstrators gathered under the banner returning to Temple Mount. They were supposed to march through the Muslim quarter of the Old City of Jerusalem and get to the Western Wall right under Temple Mount. However, they were stopped well in advance. The police said that they violated the terms of the permit of the demonstration. Confrontations with police then erupted, and the demonstration was violently dispersed. Regarding IDF activity in the West Bank, there was substantial IDF activity reported in Nur Hasham's refugee camp near Tulkarem, in Beit Omar between Bethlehem and Hebron, and in El Bira near Ramallah. In the Dahaisha refugee camp, there were also substantial confrontations reported. 21 Palestinians are reported arrested throughout the West Bank in the last 24 hours. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, the southern parts of Lebanon, there were substantial escalations in the last 24 hours. Substantial amounts of rockets and missiles were fired from Lebanon, targeting the Shtula, Malachia, and Zar'it area in the Upper Galilee, Arab el-Ramsha in the Western Galilee, and in the Bukata area in the northern Golan, 3 missiles were launched from Syria, targeting that area. In addition, an RPG missile hit a car in the Matat area in northern parts of Israel, killing 1 Israeli civilian. Hezbollah also claimed responsibility for upwards of 13 border incidents. This includes firing either gun battles or specific RPGs or other border incidents with the IDF. 13 is the record that Hezbollah has taken responsibility of since the war began. Substantial IDF retaliations included warplanes and attack helicopters, also firing with tanks and artillery, targeting different launching sites, Hezbollah military compounds and advanced headquarters of Hezbollah, and different lookout posts. There are also reports in Syria's opposition websites that explosions were heard in Damascus and the Quneitra area as a result of Israeli retaliations following those missiles that were launched from Syria. Responding to the escalations in the north, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu echoed statements that were made by Defense Minister Alon several days ago, stating that if Hezbollah launches a war against Israel, Beirut will end up looking like Khan Yunis. Regarding casualties in the last 24 hours, in addition to that Israeli civilian that was killed, 2 Israeli soldiers were lightly injured from RPG fire near Shtula. On the other side, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad's Al-Quds brigades announced that 2 of its operatives were killed in the border between Lebanon and Israel, carrying out a border incident. In addition, Hezbollah announced that 3 of its operatives were killed, bringing the total number of Hezbollah operatives that were killed since the war began to 93. Moving on to some of the regional developments, the U.S. today imposed sanctions on 13 people and entities that were involved with trafficking funds to the Houthis. This may relate to a report in the Wall Street Journal regarding disagreement between the United States and Israel about how to respond to the Houthi attacks. According to the report, the U.S. is pressuring to respond on its own, in its own ways, and non-direct confrontational way, in order to avoid further escalations, and there's specific concern in the United States that a direct Israeli retaliation will lead to further escalations and possibly ignite the entire region. According to the report, there's ongoing talks between the sides regarding how to respond to the Houthi attacks. Possibly these sanctions against the different people is a first step on the United States' part. Moving on to some of the political and general trends that occurred in the last 24 hours. There's ongoing political strife in Israel, with members of the expanded cabinet in the government stating that they have become simply a rubber stamp for the war cabinet. There's also reports of tension within Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party, with several different Likud members openly challenging his leadership, and that there's strife between the military secretary to Netanyahu and Netanyahu's chief of staff. I mention this because, as I've stated several times, there have been several instances in which the United States has expressed concern that Netanyahu will favor his political survival above what makes sense for the war, and that the war will actually be dictated based upon what Netanyahu thinks is good for his political career. Based upon that, this political strife may end up being very meaningful for how the war develops. In other news, Israel's Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, today ordered the prison service to hold Nukhba fighters, that is specific Hamas commandos, most of them which took part on October 7th, to hold Nukhba fighters in underground facilities where conditions are minimal. This may prove to be critically important whenever the conditions of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails are worsened. This often causes massive strife and uprising, specifically in the West Bank, so this may prove to be influential as the days go on. Other political news, President Biden today spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu and with the King of Jordan, Abdullah, about increasing humanitarian aid and releasing hostages in the Gaza Strip, as well as allowing the Red Cross to visit hostages and deliver medicines to them. Other news, PEN America, which is an organization of authors and top writers, published a condemnation of Israel's attacks against different facilities that are associated with what PEN America does, specifically citing the destruction of libraries, universities, and other cultural areas, such as mosques and churches that hold, as they said, temples of knowledge. Amidst this, a video was released today showing the detonation of a university in the Gaza Strip as the IDF soldiers are chanting in the background. In other political news relating to the region, there are reports in the U.S. that diplomats are hoping to re-engage normalization talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Those normalization talks were all frozen on October 17th, even though they were very advanced. Amos Hochstein, who is President Biden's special envoy to the region, specifically stated that he hopes for this advancement as all sides have an interest in this. However, I will add it is very unlikely that there will be any advancement in this, at least until the war is over, some sort of permanent ceasefire takes effect. In other news, Iranian President Raisi met with Russian President Putin today in Moscow. The two discussed, according to reports, regional developments and Ukrainian developments, and Russia's influence and assistance to the region. Other news, Austria today stated that it is going to resume its aid to Palestinians that was frozen on October 7th, after verifying that this aid is not going to be used for terrorism. Finally, on to speculations regarding the future of the Gaza Strip. As part of the plan of the United States that the Palestinian Authority, or a revitalized Palestinian Authority, will take control of the Gaza Strip, Al Arabi Al Jadid reported today that the U.S. is mounting heavy pressure on Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas to carry out drastic reforms in the Palestinian Authority, specifically in the areas related to security. Sources quoted in the paper stated that in a meeting that occurred yesterday between Philip Gordon, who is the Vice President Kamala Harris's National Security Advisor, and PA Chairman Abbas, Gordon brought up economic development in Gaza Gaza as part of the future plans to revitalize the Strip, and also preparing the Palestinian Authority for elections. According to the sources, Abbas emphasized that these are internal Palestinian matters and called on the U.S. to pressure Israel to stop the war. The meeting was summarized, according to the sources, as tense and negative. So this relates to at least the behind the scenes while the United States is confronting Israel regarding the future of the Gaza Strip and saying that the Palestinian Authority will have to be revised in order to take control of the Gaza Strip. The U.S. is not waiting for Israel to engage this, but is actually working with the Palestinian Authority directly in order to try to prepare it for possibly taking over the Gaza Strip in the future. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.